Supergod, create Civilization 0. Kesha is stunned. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151, Reaching the Pinnacle. I don't know how talented he is. Perhaps, even if he enters the top 100, he still has the opportunity to enter the inner sect. Point. I want to see how proud it would be to become an inner sect disciple. Point. That's right. Once you become an inner sect disciple, not only will your status be improved, but your strength will also have a qualitative leap. Point. Looking at the third elder lying on the ground, a group of people were talking about it, and their eyes were full of admiration when they looked at Lu Xuan. Point. Such a genius, even a late Saint Realm powerhouse. I'm afraid it can't compare to it. Point. Where did this guy come from? So powerful. Point. Could it be that this kid also came from other realms? Impossible. There are so many people in our Xianxing sect. Even if he came from other realms, we should have records. Could it be that this kid also came from the continent? And is he a genius? Some early and late Saint Realm powerhouses couldn't help but guess, and they had a strong interest in Lu Xuan's identity. Point. In their opinion, Lu Xuan was able to break through to the middle stage of the Saint Realm in just a few years, and he was definitely a brilliant and talented monster after all. Lu Xuan's talent was already extremely abnormal. Point. At this moment, a figure slowly walked over from the sky. He was dressed in a green shirt, with a tall and majestic figure, like a god descending from the earth, with a sharp face and a heroic look between his eyebrows. He was surrounded by a domineering aura that looked down on the world. Point. This person was the leader of the Xianxing sect, Xuan Li. Point. Li Xuankang stood with his hands behind his back, looking at Lu with indifference, and then said, "No matter who you are, if you dare to hurt the people of my Xianxing sect, you must pay the price." Point. Lu Xuan glanced at Li Xuankang, but ignored him. He continued to look at the three elders lying on the ground and said, "Since you are all disciples of Xianxing sect, then I will fulfill your wish and spare your life. How dare you?" Chapter 152, What is the purpose? That's right. I heard that he had fought with a strong man in the middle stage of the Holy Realm, and he easily killed the opponent with one sword. His strength was so strong that it was shocking. Point. If I could have such strength, even if I faced a strong man in the late stage of the Holy Realm, I would have the strength to fight. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Lu Xuan, looking at that majestic figure, and their eyes were full of passion. Point. Among the strong men in the middle stage of the Holy Realm present, basically only the leaders of the 713 sects and the strong men in the late stage of the Holy Realm, as well as those strong men in the early stage of the Holy Realm, were qualified to challenge Lu Xuan, which was extremely rare. Point. But now, Lu Xuan was able to challenge three strong men in the middle stage of the Holy Realm alone. "Lu Xuan, you be asterisk 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 D. You dare to sneak attack us. Today I will never forgive you." A voice filled with a cold breath sounded, and an old man in a green robe swooped down from the sky. And the breath on his body was surging and surging, like a river rushing, and he slammed towards Lu Xuan fiercely. Point. Get out. Lu Xuan snorted coldly, and then formed seals with his hands. The energy in his body exploded, and a golden dragon claw stretched out from the void and grabbed the old man in green robe. Point. Bang bang. The two palm prints collided with each other, and the violent airwaves spread out in all directions, overturning a large area of houses, and then those houses were directly turned into ruins under the violent energy fluctuations. What? Seeing this, the pupils of the old man in green robe shrank, and then he hurriedly retreated to the back. Although his strength was not as good as the third elder, it was not much worse, so he did not intend to confront Lu Xuan head on. Point. It's not that easy to leave. Point. Lu Xuan sneered, and his figure swept like a flash of lightning, and in the blink of an eye he caught up with the old man in green robe. Point. Sword intention, destruction method. Point. Break it for me. Lu Xuan shouted in a low voice, holding the long sword in his hand, and slashed it out with a sword. Point. Buzz. Chapter 153, Tyranny. After hearing the words of the third elder, Lu Xuan's brows were slightly wrinkled, and then he groaned and said, "Do you want me to save you?" Hearing Lu Xuan's question, The third elder nodded quickly and said, "That's right. Only you can save me. As long as you save me, I promise to let you be domineering in Xianxing sect." Hearing this, the eyes of others also lit up, and then looked at the third elder and said, "Really? Yes. I always keep my word. As long as I promise that you can spend a period of time here safely, no one will dare to touch you, because I will let the city building sect help you restore your strength." The third elder gritted his teeth and said, "How much contribution value do you want? You name a price." Contribution value. A strange arc appeared at the corner of Lu Xuan's mouth, and then he smiled lightly and said, "Are you sure you are willing to use contribution value to exchange for me to help you recover? Of course. If you don't agree, there is no need for us to talk about it anymore. Okay, I promise you. Seeing Lu Xuan's agreement, the third elder was relieved. As long as he could get his soul back, it would be fine, even if he had to pay some contribution points. After all, soul power is a very precious thing for the strong men in the spirit sea realm like them, but it is of the same quality. Whoosh, Lu Xuan's figure flashed and appeared in front of the third elder. He stretched out his right hand and grabbed him. "Let me go. I want to leave here and return to the sect." The third elder's face was distorted, and he roared angrily. "Since you have already promised me, you still want to escape?" Lu Xuan laughed sarcastically. "Dambi asterisk 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 D. If you dare to break your promise, the sect will never let you go." Chapter 154. All seals. Young master, we really can't hand over half of the contribution value. The purpose of our coming out this time is to participate in the sect dispute. Now the sect dispute has not ended yet, and we still need to report back to the sect. If we hand over this part of the contribution value, once the sect finds out, I'm afraid all of us will not be able to escape the bad luck. You can rest assured about this, and the senior leaders of your Xianxing sect will not know about this. Lu Xuan smiled lightly. Hearing this, the third elder's face eased a little, and then he said in a deep voice, "Since the young master has said it, then I naturally believe it. I will leave this part of the contribution value to the young master, but I hope that the young master can keep his promise and not intervene, no matter what happens in the sect. After all, there are too many disciples in the sect who need to be taken care of. No problem. Lu Xuan said lightly. Seeing this, the third elder finally breathed a sigh of relief. You can leave now. Remember, you are not allowed to retaliate against us, otherwise, don't blame us for being rude to you. Lu Xuan snorted coldly, and then waved his sleeves, and a ray of golden light suddenly appeared on the head of the third elder. "This is your identity jade card. When you go back, give me your identity jade card, and I will send someone to take you away." After Lu Xuan finished speaking, he retracted the golden light, and then his figure flashed and turned into a stream of light and disappeared. Looking at Lu Xuan's back, a trace of haze passed through the eyes of the third elder. What should I do? What can I do to leave this ghost place? If I don't recover my soul as soon as possible, I'm afraid I will disappear from this world forever, the third elder murmured, but his eyes were fixed on the direction where Lu Xuan disappeared, and his heart couldn't help but set off a huge wave. Chapter 155. A good choice. I naturally know that my opponent is strong. Lu Chen smiled lightly. However, I don't bother to care about this level of battle. As long as I don't want to, who can do anything to me? Are you really unwilling? A trace of worry flashed across the beautiful eyes of the green-clothed woman, but when she saw Lu Chen's firm expression, she chose to believe it. Well, I believe that Brother Chen will definitely return to the sect safely. The green-clothed woman nodded. Xiao, you go back to the sect first, Lu Chen said. Where are you going? The green-clothed woman was puzzled. 023. Of course, to resolve the grievances between the sects. Lu Chen showed a playful smile at the corner of his mouth and said immediately. The grievances between the sects. Does Brother Chen want to go to the Xianxing sect alone? Hearing this, the green-clothed woman trembled slightly, and her cheeks were full of horror. That's right. I'm going to break into the Xianxing sect. Lu Chen grinned. I came to this continent this time to seek a breakthrough and become a more powerful existence. I naturally disdain to fight with such a small fry. Hearing Lu Chen's words, the face of the green-clothed woman was full of shock. This young man was really crazy. You know, Lu Chen's current position is the top level even in the eyes of an ordinary person. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156, The Hermit Master. Then, I'll take my leave. Lu Xuan said, and nodded to the woman in green. Then, Lu Xuan's figure turned into a stream of light, soared into the sky, and disappeared. Brother Chen, are you really going to break into the Xianxing sect? Looking at Lu Xuan's disappearing back, a complex expression flashed across the face of the woman in green. After an unknown amount of time, the woman in green finally sighed and murmured to herself, Brother Chen, I hope you can return safely. Whoosh. Suddenly, a stream of light suddenly shot from a distance point. After seeing the appearance of the stream of light clearly, the woman in green suddenly showed a look of joy on her face. Brother Chen, I have entered the territory of the Xianxing sect. Lu Xuan smiled and looked at the woman in green, and said, Brother Chen, you are so fast. The woman in green was full of admiration on her face, and her eyes were full of surprise when she looked at Lu Xuan. That's it. Lu Xuan laughed. But soon, the green-clothed woman found that Lu Xuan's smile was not pure. Brother Chen, what's wrong? Are you unhappy? The green-clothed woman frowned and asked in confusion. Lu Xuan smiled and said, I'm very happy, but why are you laughing so strangely? The green-clothed woman was even more confused. What was the reason? Why? The green-clothed woman looked at Lu Xuan expectantly, waiting for his answer. Because you are so beautiful. Lu Xuan smiled, and then his figure suddenly disappeared. When Lu Xuan appeared again, he was already standing at the foot of the mountain of Xianxing sect. Brother Chen, did you sneak in from outside? The green-clothed woman looked at Lu Xuan, and rolled her eyes speechlessly. I don't want to, but there is no way. Lu Xuan scratched his head. The green-clothed woman looked at Lu Xuan, her face full of helplessness. Junior sister. At this moment, a loud voice resounded through the void. Lu Xuan looked up, and saw a middle-aged man galloping over. This middle-aged man, wearing a green robe, looked like an immortal, with the demeanor of a hermit. Second master, you are back. The green-clothed woman called respectfully. Chapter 157. You will have to pay the price, if you can't eat it. Hearing the words of the middle-aged man, the green-clothed woman's pretty face turned pale, and she said quickly, Second master, I didn't think so. If you didn't think so, then why are you still protecting this kid? The middle-aged man glanced at Lu Xuan coldly and said, if you don't want to be expelled from the Xianxing sect, kneel down and confess your crime immediately, and I will pretend that I have never met you. Otherwise, I don't mind making you pay for it. Hearing this, the green-clothed woman's face became paler and paler. She gritted her teeth and said, Second master, why are you doing this? I believe that Brother Chen must not have done it on purpose. Humph. Whether he did it on purpose or not, I saw through it at a glance. The middle-aged man said, I don't care what you think in your heart, but in the Xianxing sect, as long as you break the rules, you must be punished according to the rules. Rules? The green-clothed woman frowned and said, what rules? Xianxing sect disciples must accept a trial every 100 years. If they pass, they can get rewards. If they fail the trial, they will be expelled from the sect. The middle-aged man said slowly. So that's it. The woman in green seemed to understand something. This 100 years is 1 month. If the woman in green passes the test in this 100 years, she will be qualified to stay in Xianxing sect. But if she fails, she will be expelled from the sect. Okay, I won't say any more nonsense. You kneel down and confess your guilt right now. I may let you go. If not, don't blame me for being rude, the middle-aged man said, and pushed his palms. The majestic spiritual power burst out instantly, directly covering Lu Xuan's body, making Lu Xuan unable to move at all. Second master, please spare him. The anxiety on the face of the woman in green was beyond description. Humph. You girl, you really favor him. Chapter 158. It's your own fault. After saying that, Lu Xuan walked aside and watched the battle quietly. The green-clothed woman looked down at her right foot, and her face suddenly turned pale. She only noticed now that her right foot was swollen. Brother Chen, it's all your fault. This is all caused by you. The green-clothed woman glared at the boy standing beside her. Ouch. Little senior sister, you are trying to kill for money. The boy covered his head and couldn't help but sigh. The green clothed woman glared at the boy fiercely and said unhappily, "It's all your fault!" 21. Okay, don't talk about these things. I still have to participate in the trial. With that, the boy left quickly. Seeing the boy leave, the green clothed woman's expression suddenly relaxed. She looked at the red patch on her ankle and couldn't help but sigh softly. Hey, it's all your fault. Looking at the woman in green, the middle-aged man showed a hint of teasing on his face and said, "Little junior sister, since you have already made a choice, I will not ask any more questions. This kid is left to you." The woman in green nodded and said, "Brother Chen, wait a moment." As she spoke, she walked to the edge of a big tree in front. Second uncle, he is just a disciple who has just entered the Xianxing sect not long ago, and we have been in this Xianxing sect for more than 10 years. Why don't you give him some leniency? Isn't it a slap in my face if you do this? The woman in green said dissatisfiedly. Haha. I think he is tired of living. The middle-aged man smiled lightly and said, "Since he is unwilling to join the sect, I will send him off personally and let him know the consequences of disobeying me." As he spoke, the middle-aged man flashed and appeared in front of the young man. The green-clothed woman's face changed slightly, and she said, "Second master, what do you want to do?" Chapter 159. Severe torture. Junior sister, he deserves all this. I didn't hurt him. You force me to do this. Don't blame me. The middle-aged man said coldly. You have ignored me for so many years. I can't do anything about it. But how can you repay kindness with enmity now? With such a narrow mind, how can you achieve great things? The green-clothed woman gritted her teeth and said. Hahaha. Junior sister, this is your improper education. I didn't educate you. The middle-aged man said. Second uncle, don't you feel that Brother Chen's potential is stronger than you think? His future is limitless. I beg you to let him go. The green-clothed woman knelt down. She didn't dare to look at the boy's cold eyes. The boy's eyes seemed to see through everything, making her feel cold all over. What did you say? You actually knelt down to your uncle for that kid? The middle-aged man's face suddenly changed, and he grabbed the woman in green and said coldly, "Little sister, are you crazy? Do you know that your actions are enough to make the entire Xianxing sect angry, and even I can't protect you at that time?" The woman in green looked pale. She raised her head tremblingly, looked at the middle-aged man, with a strong begging look in her eyes. Second uncle, Brother Chen is my most beloved brother. He can't be hurt because of my affairs. Please give him a way out. The middle-aged man frowned when he heard it. He didn't expect that the woman in green actually knelt down to him for that boy. Chapter 160. Unpredictable. The green-clothed woman's face changed slightly when she heard this. This middle-aged man even brought out his master, Chenna. "I'll give you 3 days to think about it." After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he turned and left. The green-clothed woman looked at the middle-aged man's back and sighed. This matter is really difficult to handle. However, she believes that Brother Chen will definitely be able to come up with a calendar. Zhang Yu looked depressed. If we had known that this would be the result, we shouldn't have gone to the monster forest with you. And we shouldn't have helped you. We would rather stay in Xianlang City and continue to be a playboy, living a life of luxury, which is more comfortable than this broken place with no birds and shits. Isn't this your own choice? Why do you regret it now? Lu 203 Xuan said with a smile. "I see that you guys usually spend a lot of money. Why don't you dare to accept such a simple challenge now? Boss, can we refuse?" Zhang Yu asked. Of course not. Lu Xuan shook his head and said with a smile, "No matter how you protest, you must participate in this challenge. Those who do not participate will be expelled from Xianxing sect and will never be allowed to set foot on Xianxing mountain. What? Boss, you are bullying us because we are illiterate. Don't forget that I'm the chief refiner of Xianxing sect. Can I not count what I said? Boss." Zhang Yu was speechless for a while, but thinking about it, he was really not his opponent. You still have half a month. I hope you can come up with a solution within this half month. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. After saying this, Lu Xuan walked into the house. Boss, didn't you say we can protest? Zhang Yu asked point. This is the rule of our Xianxing sect. Protesting is useless. After saying this, Lu Xuan disappeared on the spot point. Zhang Yu sat down angrily and said with a face full of resentment, "No, I must escape from Xianxing sect. Boss, you are wrong. We are not members of Xianxing sect yet. Why can you escape?" Chapter 161. Different from ordinary people. It is said that his physique is different from that of ordinary people. His strength is amazing, and his best skill is speed. Zhang Yu's mouth curled up a smile and continued, "If we can know his whereabouts in advance and then sneak attack, maybe we can kill him. Unfortunately, we have no way to predict where he will choose to appear this time. However, I believe that a powerful enemy always likes to act alone. I think as long as we wait for him at the place where he appears, we can definitely kill him. But how to wait for him? Leave this to me," Zhang Yu said with a smile. You? Are you sure? Don't worry. This time, I promise to kill him. Zhang Yu patted his chest and said confidently. But what if you fail? Zhang Fan asked. This time, I'm sure. Zhang Yu smiled and said, besides, I don't want to see you two brothers get hurt. I love you two boys very much. Zhang Fan and Zhang Yu pouted at the same time. This guy just coaxed them. The next day, the group came to the outskirts of the monster forest, which was where they were going in the past few days, and was also a restricted area. Hey, this is a restricted area nearby. You'd better take a detour quickly, otherwise, the consequences will be disastrous. Seeing the group entering the monster forest, one of the middle-aged men kindly advised. This man's name is Zhao Hu, and he is the deacon of the Xianxing sect. His strength has reached the 5th level of innate. Chapter 162. I still advise you. Humph. What do you want to do to me? Zhao Hu looked at Lu Xuan and shouted angrily. What do I want to do? Haha, I want to beat you up. Lu Xuan roared and rushed towards Zhao Hu. Seeing that Lu Xuan dared to attack him, Zhao Hu was also angry. Zhao Hu waved his hand and a long sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Then, he shook his wrist and pointed the long sword directly at Lu Xuan. Get out of here. 7. 5-3. Lu Xuan slammed the long sword with one palm. Bang. Lu Xuan was shaken away by the long sword and flew backwards 300 meters away. Humph. You dare to provoke me with this little strength? You simply don't know how high the sky is. Zhao Hu sneered. Take another move from me. Split the cloud. The long sword passed through the void with a sharp gust of wind and rushed straight to Lu Xuan. Seeing the long sword attacking him, Lu Xuan quickly dodged. However, as soon as he dodged, he found that he was actually standing unsteadily. At this moment, Lu Xuan felt like he was stepping on cotton without any strength in his body. Plop. At this moment, his body fell directly to the ground. His face pale. Haha, this time, you will definitely lose. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163. Arrogant and domineering. Zhang Fan sighed and said, we have all been used by him. I can still keep calm now, but what about you? Do you want to see me being blown up and killed? Zhao Fan, I don't want to see you get into trouble. Zhang Fan shook his head and said, don't worry, he dare not do anything to me. My blood contains soul power. He dare not mess around. After hearing Zhang Fan's words, Lu Xuan nodded. He was in a very complicated mood. He could not repay Zhang Fan's kindness to him in this life. Zhao Fan, I'm sorry. Lu Xuan looked at Zhang Fan and said, I shouldn't doubt you. Whether you are an enemy or a friend, I should believe you. It's just that at this time, how do you let me choose? Zhang Fan patted Lu Xuan's shoulder and said, I know your difficulties, and I also know that I can only rely on you to help me here, so you have to kill this guy as soon as possible. Whether he is an enemy or a friend, as long as we kill him, we will win. Well, Lu Xuan nodded. Haha, I think you two should stop talking nonsense. I gave you a chance, but you didn't seize it. In that case, don't blame me for being ruthless. Zhao Hu smiled grimly and said, boy, I will make you understand that our family is the master of this land. Our Zhao family only needs a few thoughts to destroy your entire Qinglang sect. Hearing Xiaohu's words, Lu Xuan narrowed his eyes, looked at Xiaohu, and said, "Is your Xiao family really that awesome? Haha, what is your Qinglang sect?" In the eyes of the Zhao family, it is not worth mentioning at all. Xiaohu said, "Now, I only need to move my hand, and you will turn into blood mist, and your sect will completely disappear from this world, because of you two trash. Is that so? However, are you worthy? Just me." Ha 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 ha. Hearing Xiaohu's words, Lu Xuan suddenly laughed wildly, and then he raised his hand and pointed at Xiaohu, saying, "I will let you know now what our Qinglang sect is." After the voice fell, Lu Xuan waved his hand violently, and a purple halo appeared on his right arm. This purple halo, like a swimming dragon, wandered on Lu Xuan's right arm, circle after circle, looking very strange. As the purple dragon wandered on Lu Xuan's arm, Xiaohu's face changed drastically. Chapter 164. Obstinate and refusal to repent. As soon as the words fell, a ball of blue flame rushed out and headed straight for Lu Xuan. Seeing this scene, Lu Xuan's pupils shrank sharply. What the hell is this? He felt an extremely hot temperature. Could this guy know a fire attribute technique? Lu Xuan had such a thought in his mind. Although he had soul power and could control the fire element, he didn't know what this blue flame was. He had never seen it before. Seeing the blue flame sweeping towards him, he quickly used a defensive formation. At the same time, he also formed a seal with his palm to prepare to resist the opponent's attack. Bang! Two powerful airwaves collided with each other, forming a terrifying ripple that spread outward. Looking at those ripples, Xiaohu's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. Can he resist my blue flame technique? This little Chusheng is indeed not simple, but no matter how simple he is, he can't compete with me. Chapter 165. Unbelievable. What is this thing that can actually become a 3-star treasure? This is impossible. He was unwilling to believe that the sword in Lu Xuan's hand could actually become a 3-star treasure. When Xiaohu was surprised, the flame bomb also flew over and hit Lu Xuan's long sword in the blink of an eye. Puff. Swish. The moment the flame bomb and the long sword touched, Lu Xuan's body shield was instantly torn apart, and at the same time, the long sword was broken. How is it possible? How is this possible? Seeing this scene, Lu Xuan's heart was also full of disbelief. He could never have imagined that the attack he used would be easily cracked by the opponent. 430. After a brief shock, Lu Dong immediately reacted. It seems that the secret method used by the opponent is not an ordinary secret method, and the opponent's attack must contain the power of the fire element, so it can offset my attack. But even so, he is still too weak. Lu Xuan's heart is full of strong self-confidence. In his eyes, the man in front of him was only an 8th level spiritualist, and he was not qualified to look at him seriously. Looking at Lu Xuan, Xiaohu sneered and said, "Xiao Chusheng, you still want to fight me? It's ridiculous. I think you should just surrender." Lu Xuan glanced at the other party and ignored him. Instead, he retreated directly. At the same time, he continuously infused the spiritual power in his body into the long sword in his hand. Swish. As Lu Xuan waved his arm, a dazzling silver white knife light emerged in the air and slashed towards Xiaohu. Seeing this scene, Xiaohu smiled coldly and said, "You want to deal with me? You think too highly of yourself." As the voice fell, Xiaohu directly waved the red spear in his hand. Boom. As the red spear was waved, a terrifying fireball slashed directly towards Lu Xuan. Boom. The two collided in mid-air, and in an instant, the entire space seemed to collapse. See, a huge pit appeared, and the long sword in Lu Xuan's hand was wrapped in this terrifying flame, and under the burning of the flame, it instantly turned into powder. Seeing this scene, Lu Xuan's heart was full of shock. What a powerful move. Just a face-to-face, I was defeated. Chapter 166 burst out. But, the long sword once again emitted a dazzling radiance. Lu Xuan slashed forward with his sword. Boom. As the sword blade and the spear in Xiaohu's hand collided, both exploded and flew backwards. Lu Xuan was sprayed with blood, while Xiaohu was not even injured. What a strong body. Seeing this scene, such a thought flashed through Lu Xuan's mind. Although Lu Xuan knew that the gap between him and Xiaohu was huge, he was not timid at all. Instead, he became more excited. He wanted to challenge beyond his level. His current level has reached the 6th level of spiritual master. If he jumps one level, he can enter the realm of spiritual master. At that time, even if the opponent uses secret techniques, he is confident that he can defeat him. However, now, he can't do it anyway, because in this world, he is not a real strongman. It seems that I must break through. Only in this way can I be qualified to challenge Xiaohu and compete with him. Otherwise, I can't beat him at all. Thinking of this, Lu Xuan's face became extremely determined. No, I absolutely cannot fail. I must win this year's Xianjiao selection competition. I must get the top 3, or even the first place. In this way, I can get more awards. Only then can I enter the True Dragon Academy. Thinking of this, Lu Xuan's heart was full of determination. Then, he rushed forward again, rushing towards Zhao. Xiaohu saw Lu Xuan rushed towards him again, revealing a ferocious expression. This rubbish really has no self-awareness at all. He doesn't know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is. Since you want to come to my door and give yourself a head, don't blame me for being rude. Roar. As Xiaohu's roar resounded, a terrifying fire attribute aura burst out of Xiaohu's body, and the red spear in his hand also turned into a blazing flame at this moment. Swish, swish. As Xiaohu waved the red spear in his hand, the surrounding void was burned to ashes by the flames. Chapter 167. Such stupidity. Puff, puff. As 2 muffled sounds came, Lu Xuan's arm went numb, and then the whole arm was dislocated by Xiaohu. How is it possible? Xiaohu's body is much stronger than mine. His strength is far superior to mine. No. We must change our strategy. Seeing this scene, countless plans quickly emerged in Lu Xuan's mind. Swish. 310 swish. At this moment, Xiaohu's figure flashed again. Swish, swish. As Xiaohu kept flashing, Lu Xuan couldn't catch his trace at all, and his attack was completely untraceable. Lu Xuan's face became extremely ugly. If this continued, he would not be able to beat Xiaohu at all. No matter what, I can't give up. I must find a way to defeat him. No, I can't be suppressed by him. Otherwise, I won't even have a chance to win. Swish, swish. Lu Xuan held the long sword in his hand and kept moving in the air, trying to avoid Xiaohu's attack. Little beast, where can you escape? Xiaohu saw this, and the corner of his mouth curled up slightly, and then he waved the spear in his hand. A series of hot flames spurted out from the spear. Swish, swish. Chapter 168. The Power of Time. Little b asterisk 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 d. I didn't expect that your strength is quite weak. Even an ordinary immortal emperor has no power to resist me. With your little strength, you dare to fight me. You are simply overestimating yourself. Hearing Xiaohu's ridicule, Lu Xuan was not angry at all. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and then the index and middle fingers of his right hand clamped the long sword, and then drew a series of strange arcs in the air, attacking Xiaohu. A trifling trick, not worth mentioning. Seeing Lu Xuan's move, Xiaohu snorted coldly. A layer of light blue halo appeared around him, which was the defensive halo. Bang, bang, bang. 21. As the long sword in Lu Xuan's hand fell, Xiaohu's defensive halo also trembled constantly, and it could collapse at any time. This level of attack, wanting to destroy my defense, is simply wishful thinking. Xiaohu's mouth corner revealed a trace of sarcasm. However, a solemn look flashed in his eyes. After all, he knew his own strength very well. In this world, the person who could hurt him had not yet been born. Suddenly, Xiaohu's expression became solemn. Because he saw that there was a white light mixed in Lu Xuan's attack. White light? Could it be that this guy controlled some fairy? Seeing this scene, Xiaohu couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive. Boom. As Lu Xuan slashed with a sword, Xiaohu's defensive aura collapsed completely. What? You. Chapter 169. Hidden Strength. Seeing this, Lu Xuan calmly swung out a sword to block Xiaohu's fist. After the 2 fists collided, violent sparks burst out, and then the 2 figures retreated several steps at the same time. This guy actually hid his strength. Xiaohu's face was full of shock. No, he controlled the power of time. Feeling the terrifying suction in Lu Xuan's body, Xiaohu's face flashed a trace of shock. How did this guy do it? How could this suction have such a terrifying pressure? Xiaohu was very confused. What? Are you scared? Seeing the shock on Xiaohu's face, Lu Xuan couldn't help but smile contemptuously. With you, are you worthy of being my enemy? Today, you must pay the price for what you did, otherwise, your future life will probably not be easy. Lu Xuan's tone was full of domineering. Hearing Lu Xuan's words, Zhao Hu's face also became gloomy. Humph, arrogant. Today, I will let you see the real strength of our Zhao family, Zhao Hu growled. Then, pieces of scales appeared on Zhao Hu's arms. Seeing this scene, Lu Xuan's expression also became solemn. Scale incarnation. This method is rare. I wonder how long it can last. Sensing Zhao Hu's body, it actually began to expand. Lu Xuan also frowned. Don't worry, it only takes 30 seconds for me to completely crush your body, and then I will see how arrogant you are. Zhao Hu's face was full of ferocious colors. Humph, just relying on some memes. Do you really think you are invincible? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Fight as per the rules. Bang, with a muffled sound, Zhao Hu's whole body was directly knocked out. Cough cough. Falling on the ground, Zhao Hu kept coughing up blood, and his face was extremely pale. This is impossible. Zhao Hu couldn't believe it. He, a Saint Venerable peak powerhouse, was actually injured by Lu Xuan. You know, Lu Xuan's strength is obviously similar to his, but now, the two are completely one in the sky and the other on the ground. Now, do you admit defeat? A cold light flashed in Lu Xuan's eyes. Seeing Lu Xuan's expression, Zhao Hu's heart was also filled with endless anger. However, the next moment, Lu's mouth corners showed a 660 teasing color. Zhao Hu, I admit that you are very powerful. Unfortunately, you met me and are destined to fail. I'll give you one last chance. Kneel down and kowtow 3 times and hand over the spiritual stone in your hand. You may still have a chance to survive. Seeing the indifference in Lu Xuan's eyes, Zhao Hu couldn't help but flash a trace of anger in his eyes. However, just as Zhao Hu was about to refute, Lu Xuan's eyes became a little more stern. If you insist on doing so, then you can go to a company who Unquan Patriarch, and I have no objection. Hearing this, Zhao Hu's mouth, corners couldn't help twitching. Although, in his heart, he hated Lu Xuan half to the bone marrow, and wanted to eat Lu Xuan alive. However, he didn't have any choice now. Because he knew very well that he didn't have any chance at all now. By the way, just now, you called him Patriarch. Don't you know what his name is? Lu Xuan suddenly asked. Don't you already know it? Even if I tell you, is it useful? You might as well ask him in person. Hearing Lu Xuan's words, Zhao Hu's face was also full of sarcasm. Humph, if that's the case, then you should also report to the King of Hell. Hearing Zhao Hu's mockery, Lu Xuan's face was instantly covered with a layer of frost. When his voice fell, a ball of fire burst out directly from his body. Chapter 171 Unbelievable. Zhao Hu roared. So what, if they are from the Eternal Divine Sect? I will beat them up, Lu Xuan said coldly. Zhao Hu's figure trembled when he heard Lu Xuan's words. Lu Xuan, you dare to touch me? I'm a disciple of the Eternal Divine Sect. If you dare to touch me, you will never leave the fairyland in your life, Zhao Hu shouted hysterically. I don't care about the disciples of the Eternal Divine Sect even more. However, after hearing Zhao Hu's words, Xuan's face showed a hint of ridicule. It's not that I don't care about them, but the disciples of the Eternal Divine Sect are not even to me, but just the stuff that carries my shoes. Do you think I will care about them? Lu Xuan said coldly. Lu Xuan, you are too old. Zhao Hu was completely angry when he heard Lu Xuan's words. Do you think you won this time? No, you are wrong. I will never forget the humiliation today. Soon, I will go to the Eternal Divine Sect in person to get back today's humiliation. After hearing Lu Xuan's words, Zhao Hu also roared hysterically. HMPH, wait until you really get to the Eternal Divine Sect. Seeing Zhao Hu's appearance, Lu Xuan also sneered. I turned around and walked into the gate. Boy, wait and see. One day, I will make you pay a heavy price. Looking at Lu Xuan, Zhao Hu also said viciously. Bang. As Zhao Hu's voice fell, a monstrous momentum suddenly broke out. Crack, accompanied by a crisp sound. Zhao Hu's body was directly torn into pieces. Chapter 172, Still motionless. These gaps, like cracks, are constantly spreading out. What is going on? Lu Xuan was also stunned, staring at this scene in amazement, with shock written all over his face. He couldn't figure out how Zhao Hu's storage ring would have cracks. This is simply too incredible. You know, Zhao Hu is a disciple of the Eternal Divine Sect, Master 87. It can be said that in the fairyland, his status is more noble than the young masters of some holy places. However, cracks appeared in his storage ring, which is really unbelievable. Could it be that this storage ring is still a treasure? Perhaps this storage ring still hides some secrets. Seeing this scene in front of him, Lu Xuan's eyes also flashed a gleam of brilliance. Although his guess was a bit far-fetched, he did not deny it. Because, apart from this explanation, he really couldn't think of any other explanation. Moreover, he was more and more curious about what secrets were hidden in the storage ring. Boom. While Lu Xuan was thinking, the surrounding space suddenly became chaotic. Oh no, this space seemed to be collapsing. Sensing the abnormality in front of him, Lu Xuan also reacted immediately. Bus. As Lu Xuan's low roar sounded, his body suddenly rushed out of the hall. Boom. As Lu Xuan rushed out, the hall exploded instantly, and a group of thick smoke directly filled the entire sky. Chapter 173, Gaps. This stream of light was the jade sword. Swish. Lu Xuan waved the jade sword in his hand, and the cracks in the space were torn open. Whoosh. Then, a strong suction force suddenly broke out, and Lu Xuan was pulled in an instant. The next moment, he felt an invisible light shield appear around him, blocking his forward steps. Feeling the movement around him, Xuan frowned slightly, and then he saw a table in front of him. An old woman was holding a cup of tea and tasting it slowly. 21. Seeing the old woman's appearance, Xuan's expression instantly became gloomy. It's you. Lu Xuan's eyes were directly locked on the old woman, and his mouth uttered a cold tone. This old woman was the old woman who dealt with Lu Xuan after he left. Your efforts were not in vain, and I finally stopped you. Little guy, today, you can't escape. The old woman smiled at Xuan, with a trace of greed in her eyes. Obviously, she had already calculated everything. Just when Lu Xuan was enveloped by the collapse of space, she appeared and intercepted Lu Xuan. Old woman, you are a little too confident. Lu Xuan also raised his eyebrows slightly, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. In his impression, this old woman was just a strong man in the innate period. But now, his feeling has completely changed. Haha. Confident? Do you think you can survive under the attack of the space storm? Hearing Lu Xuan's words, the old woman's expression still did not change. In her eyes, there was only greed. Moreover, her attitude towards Lu Xuan was obviously not very friendly. Since you have already determined that I'm your prey, then, should you drink this cup of tea first? Lu Xuan ignored the old woman and sat next to her, picking up the tea scale on the table. Chapter 174, Feeling like quitting. Under this control, the water in the cup also slowly flowed into the teacup. Seeing this scene, the old woman also widened her eyes and her face became even paler. Although Lu Xuan's current strength is not as good as the primary level of innateness, he has already comprehended the power of law after all, and the power of law he comprehended is extremely profound. In this case, the power of controlling the law exerted by Lu Xuan is just like an antelope hanging its horns, leaving no trace. In this case, if Lu Xuan wants to escape, the old woman can't stop him. In this case, the old woman is also in a dilemma. Lu Xuan, what do you want to do? Do you know that I'm helping you break through the innate realm now? If you resist now, wouldn't it be a violation of your oath? The old woman stared at Lu Xuan, her eyes filled with horror. She never thought that this young man would dare to violate her oath. Humph. Oath? So what? Hearing this, Lu Xuan sneered, and his face was full of strong sarcasm. Old woman, I advise you to be sensible and hand that thing to me quickly, otherwise you will suffer. Lu Xuan also stared at the old woman coldly, and there were bursts of cold light in his eyes. Junior, I respect you as a distinguished guest of our Xianlang mercenary group, so I treat you with courtesy. But my respect for you does not mean that you can be unscrupulous. The old woman stared at Lu Xuan, and a trace of anger surged in her eyes. She is a strong man at the peak of the late innate stage point. Even the existence of the early innate stage is vulnerable in front of her, but now, Lu Xuan has been speaking rudely again and again. And Lu Xuan did not take the old woman seriously at all. In this case, don't blame me for being rude. While speaking, Lu Xuan clenched his right fist, and then smashed the teapot fiercely. Bang. Bang. Under the astonished gaze of the old woman, Lu Xuan's fist collided with the teapot. Crack. A crisp sound came. Chapter 175 Total Collapse. Lu Xuan stared at the old woman, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. Hearing Lu Xuan's voice, the old woman was also shocked. What did you say? What? Do you still want to cheat? Lu Xuan's face suddenly became gloomy, and a monstrous fierceness burst out from his body. Feeling the spread of this fierceness, the woman hurriedly lowered her head. Although Lu Xuan's strength is far inferior to hers now. However, she also understands that under Lu Xuan's means, if she wants to resist, she will probably only perish. Okay, tell me, what should I do to help me? The old woman gritted her teeth, and a ruthless look appeared in her eyes. Then she said in a deep voice. Hearing the old woman's words, Lu Xuan smiled. He waved his palm, and suddenly, a ray of light flashed on his wrist. And with the shining of that light, a huge vortex rose from his wrist. This vortex exudes a heart-pounding wave, causing the surrounding space to distort. Feeling the wave of this vortex, the old woman couldn't help shrinking her pupils after sensing the strength of this vortex. The old woman's face also showed a deep shock. Could this be? Looking at the old woman's shocked expression, Lu Xuan also smiled slightly. Immediately, he pointed at the vortex and said, You are right. This is the power of devouring. As long as you swallow that thing, it will become a part of you. Hearing Lu Xuan's words, the old woman's face was also full of shock. Devouring power. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.